So we're going to keep things moving along here before we let you guys go get more beer. By the way, feel free if you guys want to fill up your glasses and go out there and network, by all means. Keep sending up your questions, text, tweet, email them to me. But right now we're going to hear from a gentleman who, I think is going to be a very important person going forward, and folks like him as the space becomes more crowded, more complicated. Cary Greene from Davis Wright Tremaine is a food and beverage attorney who specializes in understanding how to capture the attention of lobbyists and legislators and really get things done both at the state and federal level. So I know Carrie isn't mic'd up, but we can give him one of these, handheld number one, and you can use the podium.
Hello.
Carrie, take it away.
Okay. Perfect. So as Chris said, I'm Cary Greene. I've been a lawyer with Davis Wright for about 2 years, and I work with a lot of producers with, mostly we're on the supplier side. We also have a big restaurant practice in our team. And a lot of the work I do is distribution work, sales, production, regulation. And one of the things I think any good regulatory lawyer needs to be able to do is he needs to be able to understand how to make laws better, right? So that's kind of where a lot of my interest comes from this. But before that, I worked with trade associations for 5 years and have done a lot of policy work over the years. So, there's kind of a wide range of things that have been done, that have been accomplished in the beer world over the last, say, 15 years, 20 years that have enabled breweries to grow. I mean, a lot of the things that breweries take for granted, the ability to sell, pints out of their tap rooms, is not something that every city or state allows people to do. So, to be able to do that is you have to get those laws changed. You have to improve them. So the question is, how do you go about this? And obviously, the market is evolving, it's developing, and things are moving, and what becomes important to people changes over time. So a lot of this really comes down to consensus building and the ability to collaborate with other brewers and with other industry members, whether it's wholesalers or whether it's retailers. The ability to all work together is the ability to get rules changed and laws changed for the benefit of the industry. We heard earlier about changing policies in San Jose, right? I mean, trying to change the laws there so that it would be easier for breweries to get started. And that's a perfect example of breweries collaborating with each other to try to make the rules work better. You're going to have people who have different business models who are going to be evolving and thinking through things in a different way. You have to be able to take advantage of all the tools that you have in front of you. So, with production, self-distribution is really helpful in early stage companies. For early stage companies, you have to be able to, sell and get to market and, take advantage of early growth. But that's only going to work for up to a certain production level. And at a certain production level, it ceases to really become productive. You have to be able to learn how to manage and handle distribution once you kind of get into that, and dealing with distribution laws can be a challenge. Knowing how far they go and pushing back when they try to go too far. I mean, that also is a matter of working with your wholesaler colleagues, working with other breweries in the industry to try to make sure that the worst policies don't get enacted and that the best policies stay in place. With a lot of the arguments and battles that are taking place and where you're going to have fights between people, a lot of it relates to who is a true craft brewer? What types of things do we want in the beer? So in New York, a lot of the movement has been towards farm brewing, right? It's towards growing a lot more hops locally. It's towards growing a lot more grain locally. That's, one way of distinguishing what is a local brewer versus what is not a local brewer. But that's only one conclusion to that. That's not necessarily the only way that people can deal with this or resolve this or think about it. So you're going to have battles over this in terms of what rules should change. And I would say that in general, if you're not involved, the rules are basically going to choose them for you. Somebody else is going to pick the rules. Somebody else is going to set the agenda. Sorry. So we already talked a little bit about this in terms of the types of privileges that a lot of the breweries seek or try to have, whether it's on-premise or off-premise. The ability to sell off your tap rooms, out of your tap rooms, the ability to sell packaged goods for off-premises. I think maybe probably just best to skip past this, and Chris and I, why don't we talk about some of these issues? Because it's a quieter room anyway, so.
Yeah, let's do it. So, you brought up production as, one of the issues that I think craft brewers are.
Which one should I sit in?
Take your pick.
Okay. I feel more like Charlie Rose over here, so.
And we've seen it here in Illinois. We've seen it out west in Arizona. I mean, these are issues that continually creep up. How much can craft brewers produce with a certain license and still have taproom privileges, secondary offsite retail privileges? From your perspective, is there a magic number? Should brewers be looking at other states for guidance? How should they start to navigate these things?
Well, I mean, you should be looking to other states. I don't think there's a magic number. And part of it is that the business is evolving and evolving quickly. So what might look like a larger brewery 15 or 20 years ago isn't going to look like a big brewery now. So if you're looking at the way rules were set then, or even if you're looking at the way rules are set now, what is considered small or what is considered medium or what is considered large, that definition is going to shift. And it's going to continue to shift. I mean, the number of 200,000 barrel breweries, there's a lot more of them now than there were even 5 years ago. And the growth rates you're seeing with some of these breweries is really fast. Do we want to pass laws that are going to hinder people from growing? Do we want to stop them from being able to have that success? And I don't think we do. Those privileges, they can come in handy. We were talking earlier about local and pitching to the local industry. That stuff can come in handy. It's a piece of the puzzle. But in beer, distribution is critical. The ability to sell through the three-tier system is critical. The ability to reach retailers is critical. And as a producer, you have to partner with people to do that. So it's great to have on-premise privileges. It's great to have the ability to sell off-premise. It's great to have 3 or 4 tap houses. But unless you have the ability to sell all your beer through your own production, you're going to need to take advantage of the traditional system as it exists, and you're going to need to compete in that system.
Right. And doesn't it ultimately just boil down to, really understanding who you are and who you want to be and the type of company that you've built?
Yeah, I mean, business models are going to vary a lot. So, I mean, again, that's where a lot of the battles are going to come. Some people are going to be looking not just to the local area. We heard earlier from a brewery who really doesn't look at all to the local market, right? And you're going to have others who are going to be hyper-local. So, I mean, the focus is going to vary tremendously, and the ability of businesses to handle, the ability of the laws to be flexible enough to deal with that. To be able to acknowledge that some breweries are going to be they're going to be small, but they're going to be looking out of state. And other breweries are going to be larger and going to be focusing on in-state. You have to account for that. There has to be flexibility. There's going to be points where you're going to have outcomes that you're not necessarily happy with, where you have businesses that you don't necessarily think fit the traditional model or fit the traditional mold. And there's going to be some people who are unhappy with that, and other people who are going to look at that and go, well, that's just fine. That works for me.
Right.
I mean, the market determines a lot of these things, and the laws have to be flexible enough. I mean, that I think has been one of the lessons of the last 20, 25 years, is that flexibility in the law has allowed industries, all of the industries, to grow. All of the craft production, all the craft distillers, craft wineries, craft breweries. When you have craft cideries coming up, you have craft meaderies coming up. I mean, there's a wide range of products that are developing, and a lot of it has to do with flexible legal systems.
Right. So how do you get all of the folks in the room to agree to a plan and sort of execute behind that plan? If you're taking a bill to the state and you're saying, this is what we want our self-distribution rights to look like this, or we want our taproom privileges to look like that, we want to be able to produce X amount. As you said, depending upon your business model, you might have certain interests. But you might all be a part of the same Illinois Brewers Guild or whatever state Brewers Guild. So how do you align those interests, get everyone, pushing behind, one single
order.
bill, one plan, and get everyone on the same page.
Well, I think part of it is recognizing that your business model isn't the only one that's out there, and acknowledging that other people in the space, they have their own profit that they need to make too in order to stay in business. So the laws can't screw other tiers, other members of the industry. I think that's what you have to go in acknowledging and recognizing is that not everything is going to be perfect for you. You're going to have to, roll a little bit with the way the law works, and sometimes it's going to be a little cumbersome.
Right.
But overall, if you can make your products and make your business model work within the system that you've got, and you can limit the amount of fights that are going to happen and limit the whole thing from blowing up. I mean, that is in everybody's interest.
Right.
But I mean, one of the things that I think you have to focus on, because we talked, I briefly talked about franchise laws. You have to acknowledge or understand that your partners, as a brewer, your partners in the distribution space, they have different profit motivations too. You have to find the right partners, good partners who are going to be collaborative with you and help grow your brand. But you have to recognize that there's certain things that you're going to need them.
Right.
So you need them to be able to have profitability, to retain staff, to retain their brands. You have to acknowledge that.
Well, and the franchise issue has been, a hot topic. It'll continue to be a hot topic. Seems that in New York, they've had some pretty good success with the 3% carve-out. In Massachusetts, they're pushing for 20%, which is pretty high of a distributor's business. I mean, again, like the question really is, if we're looking, at New York and Massachusetts right next to one another, and such drastic
Different
different
right.
Approaches to what is essentially the same law, the same outcome. It might vary slightly by state. It doesn't seem like the industry as a whole is aligned on where they want to be with these things.
I don't think they're ever going to be aligned. The worst practices to me are in Jersey passed, about 7-8 years ago, they passed good cause compensated termination. Now that is really pushing it. Somebody completely screws up your brand and you still have to pay them. I mean, that's pretty wild.
Right.
But often we will advise clients, even with exemptions, that you're going to have you should have a robust contract, and it should give the distributor incentives to invest in your brand.
Right.
You have to have them do that. So I don't think you're going to have disagreements, because the nature of distribution in the beer business is such that you always need wholesalers to make investments in your brand in order to grow your brand.
Well, and this kind of came to a head in Texas as well, or it is coming to a head in Texas, where wholesalers are allowed to buy and sell brand rights, but brewers are not allowed to sell their own rights if they're self-distributing.
Yeah, and that is a tool that small brewers and craft brewers and growing brewers have, even larger brewers have, to be able to get interest in their brand and to be able to get the investment. Right? If you have somebody paying per CE in advance of your brand going into a particular market, they are going to have an incentive to sell that brand and to push it back in the market to make sure that it's successful. So if you're taking that tool out of the hands of brewers and saying, well, no, this is going to be prohibited, they can sell your brand, but you can't sell it to them. You're taking an enormous tool out of the hands of brewers to be able to push and grow their brands.
Right.
And you're potentially locking people into relationships that they may not want to have and saying, tough, you can't do anything about it. And I don't think that should be how the structure should function. I think most franchise laws presume a robust contract going in. And you should have robust contracts in franchise states. But they shouldn't go so far as to to disincentivize brewers wanting to sell to the wholesalers. I mean, it's the same thing. So it's a flip side of the coin.
Well, and with so many different breweries now starting up, and obviously giving away their brand rights to various wholesalers, it seems like that might at some point actually become, kind of a nice little business for some of these wholesalers that are picking up the distribution rights to a brand, maybe growing sales for a period of time and then flipping it.
No, I mean, there are people who have incubator business models. I mean, that's the thing again, we want to make sure that there's flexibility in the joints within the legal system. So, just in the same way that breweries have different business models, some are going to focus on local, some are going to focus on national, you're going to have distributors with different business models. Some are going to be really old school in their thinking and thinking basically, I don't want to have any competition. I don't want to be able. I want to have the stable of brands that I have, and I don't want them to be able to go away unless I really want them to go away. So you're going to have that. Then you're going to have people who are going to say, I want to invest in this brand because if I invest in them, they'll feel more confidence in me. They'll feel like my partner. They want to work with me. They want to grow with me. So you'll have that as a business model. And then you have the third, which is, this is a startup brand. I will specialize in startups. I will help them grow and flower, and then I will sell the brand rights to somebody else.
Right.
And those business models exist, and they're good business people who are doing it. So.
Right. So do you see more craft brewers being able to make some headway on the franchise law issues in other states? Are you working with any craft brewery clients or small brewery clients that are at least indicating to you that they're starting to make some headway at that? At changing the laws, at changing the franchise laws?
Well, I mean, I think, again, this gets back to a lot of the production issues. A lot of the production issues, I think, are to some degree solved. But, there's going to be a battle between larger breweries and smaller breweries over what types of privileges they have. And then with distribution, I don't think it's a matter of getting rid of franchise laws. I think it's a matter of keeping out the worst practices. So, I mean, the issues in Texas where you have these breweries challenging the prohibition on brand sales. That's a good thing for brewers to be doing and for pushing. Where you have, compensated good cause termination. I mean, that's really pushing. That's really pushing the boundary of what is a fair business relationship and where the incentives are. So I frankly don't think that those are particularly good laws for distributors. I think those are bad laws for distributors. But these battles are going to continue, and the way where people come down on them is going to vary pretty significantly.
Right.
So I mean, New York came down with this farm brewer thing, where their conclusion basically was, we want to make sure that and I think it's in some ways you could consider it a form of protectionism, but basically they're saying we want to make sure that the local brewers remain local and are considered local. So we're going to make them only, if they want to sell New York State beer, then they have to have New York State grown products in them.
Right.
And that's borrowed a lot from the wine
New York
industry.
State labeled beer, that is.
Right, New York State labeled beer.
Yeah.
But that presumably is going to lead to cachet and maybe additional privileges and other kinds of things that are built in. Whether that ultimately proves a model that other states adopt, I really don't know. I haven't seen a rush of other states push to do something like that,
right,
other than New York.
So pivoting the focus just a little bit here to, since we're talking about the labeling issues, we've seen on the spirit side, certainly a lot of class action suits coming against some of the spirit companies for the handmade claims. Right. You have, at least on the beer side, with Miller Coors and Blue Moon, the suit in San Diego there, claiming that Blue Moon is not a craft product, but it's purporting to be a craft, masquerading, I think was the word, masquerading as a craft product. Opinions aside on what the authenticity of these brands are, how big of an issue will labeling be for craft brewers, and how much attention should they be paying to that? Because clearly, when you start dissecting a label and the claims that you're making on a label, it could get pretty tricky if you're saying it's handmade or it's artisan or it's craft, and leave yourself open for some challenges, it would seem.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, we talked about this last night, but to some degree, this is a welcome to the food and beverage industry. And I hate to put it that way, but shakedowns are part of the game. And that's just, particularly in California, where the laws allow lawyers to be not quite, I don't really think of it as something that's a good habit or good behavior. But it's essentially a shakedown, and it's a shakedown for money, and that's part of how the business operates. I don't think it's possible to really avoid these suits. It's a matter of, I don't think it's particularly good for California to have this be like that. It's notorious for it in the food business in general. The number is typically around 50K, and it's basically, that's the walk away. You want to walk away, you want us to go away, $50,000. And I mean, that really bothers me as a lawyer, but that's kind of just that's kind of a notice that we've grown up as an industry, that people are paying attention enough to us that they think we have deep enough pockets that they can go after money from us. So I think.
Well, maybe some of these companies do.
Some of them do, for sure, but at the same time, yes, there are people probably making claims that they shouldn't be making, and if you are. You may be more vulnerable if you're pushing claims harder than others. But I think anybody in the business is potentially open to this. I mean, the other area that we're not talking about here is just basic trademarks, right? So if trademarks or trade names are utilizing geographic names, as an example, like that could be grounds in itself for suing, for making claims. So there's just a wide range of issues. I mean, if you have a creative lawyer, he's going to come up with a way of suing you, whether you're pushing the boundaries or not.
Right. So brewers going forward have to be, really on point, really on top of their game, cognizant of all the vulnerabilities that might be out there. Then.
Yeah. And I would say in that case also, and this gets back to building up with your own industry, your political power, and your consensus building within the industry. It benefits nobody in the industry if you have people who have nothing to do with the industry coming in and suing you for label claims. It benefits no one. It doesn't benefit brewers, it doesn't benefit distributors, it doesn't benefit retailers. It doesn't benefit consumers. So, I mean, coalition building political capital, and pushing ahead using your trade associations or your products is a way of heading off some of these challenges. One quick story, and I know we're over time. So one of my clients is in DC, makes a beer called Smells Like Freedom. They introduced it this year, and it is a result of DC's passing a cannabis law, legalizing cannabis consumption in DC. Now, sale is still illegal, production is still illegal in DC, but you can consume in DC. So they introduced a beer taking advantage of the relationship between hops and cannabis. And the beer smells and tastes like cannabis. And it's called Smells Like Freedom, right? So this is clearly a politically driven product.
Right.
And it's good, but that's not really the focus of it. So, I mean, they are there taking, it's not a trade association issue, it's taking your product there. And it was teamed up with Oscar Blues, it was a collaboration. But it's taking your product and using your presence in the market to accomplish a political goal. So that's another avenue. I mean, you can do this as an individual and you can do this as a group. Right,
and we've seen brewers, come together, do a collaborative effort to push behind, some legislative change that they're lobbying for, and say, hey, but here's this beer that we've brewed in celebration of what we're trying to accomplish.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's going to be, very interesting to see how all these things develop. Not only the label claims, the trademark issues, franchise laws. There's just so many different. We could have sat up here and talked for an hour on each of those issues. And I know we're only just scratching the surface, but certainly if you guys have questions for Carrie and anything legislatively, how things might play out, pick his brain. He's certainly an expert on this stuff. Thank you, Carrie.
Sure.
Cheers.